All right, what's up? We are back. It is Jeff and I. It is 2 p.m. in Baltimore. For Jeff, it is 8 a.m. on Maui. So it is morning for both of us. Cheers and good morning, my
Cheers.
friend. We are here to chat about the value of DIY, do it yourself. It
Yes.
is a lifestyle, it is a state of mind, and it is something that we have subscribed to for much of our lives. And with that has come a ton of success and a ton of failure that we have taken as lessons to make us sharper and wiser. And we're going to chat about that today. Jeffrey, have you have the knowledge of 70s punk and some of the origins of this type of mindset. I'm pretty ignorant to that. So please, for me and anyone paying attention, make us wiser.
Yeah, Jordan, I would love to share with you and anyone listening. I am fortunate that punk rock reached me in rural Carroll County in my high school years. And it was through some friends who were getting into the straight edge movement and hardcore punk and stuff like that. And then, of course, they were seeing what was going on in the modern times. And then we took it backwards and we got to bands like the Ramones and the Sex Pistols and Crass. And all of these bands, when they started, they almost seem tame when we listen now. But if you were to think about what they were producing at that time, there was no venue, there was no stream for them to release their music. So they had to do it themselves. They generally came from like a blue collar background, mostly in England and then in New York. So that blue collar work ethic went into, if you wanted to get something done, you did it yourself. So if you were making a cassette, you would get the cassette made probably by recording on an 8-track and then get one cassette made. And then you and your friends would spread the cassette by, creating another one and sharing it. It was labor intensive. The insides of CDs and cassettes would be made like out of just printing a piece of paper, folding it up, and then putting it in with your own artwork that you created. And it was a very pure expression of, here, I made this for you, because you really made it for them, and then you spread it. This goes up into like the Discord years with Fugazi, who is a big influence on me. And they had the Discourse House, and they would print, and then all get together and do these little folding parties where they would either fold the inserts for 7-inch records or CDs or cassettes, or they'd all print flyers for their bands and then all go out and spread them together. So it's a pretty awesome process that just seeing, I wasn't in either one of those scenes, but I just saw the power of it. And then as I became a musician, I could carry that on. And I think you've done similar.
Yeah, I mean, these bands help lay the groundwork for community building and promotion that made it easier for us as teens and young adults. I want to say real quick, Jeff, as we're learning this, speaking of blue collar, your mic is sometimes whipping against or scraping against your blue collar.
I will take my
there you
blue
go.
colors back a little bit.
Little by little, we're taking it off.
That's right.
So look, this idea of doing it yourself, Jeff and I have experienced that in really profound ways as musicians, as members of bands. And I know for me, I identify as a drummer. I love being a drummer, but I never tried to be the best drummer. I want it to be like the best drummer in a band.
Yeah.
And part of that was being in a band that was able to express itself in the world. And so it allowed me to develop all of these skills in communication, in entrepreneurship, et cetera. And because it's something I always wanted to do, I just did it starting at a very young age. This idea of doing it yourself, it wasn't something I had to like think about, do I do it or not? I just wanted it so badly that I just started doing it, whether that was being 14 years old and recording my first songs on like an 8-track recorder and deciding, okay, 2 mics are going to go on this drum kit. Where do we place them?
Yeah.
And look, I was fortunate enough to live in an area in Baltimore where there was a healthy, vibrant local music community. So I was able to pay attention to local musicians that I became a fan of, and kind of notice this is what they're doing. So for Geoff and I, being in local bands and then being able to have success more regionally, and then even beyond that, it allowed us to learn how to be marketers. It taught us how to be publicists, you know, how to work with press to amplify our message. It really, MySpace and social media, how do we leverage that? I mean, I booked weekend tours using MySpace, plugging in a 100-mile radius of where the previous show would be and figuring out what bands that are kind of in a similar type of genre or community are playing certain venues. I discovered new towns by doing that.
Yeah.
We became merchandisers. My buddy Rusty, he was very helpful in one of my bands, and he literally purchased a 4-color screen printing press. So I'd go to his dad's house after school and before a weekend run of shows, and we'd literally come up with a design on Photoshop, and we'd actually make the individual screens. We'd already have shirts and tote bags and whatever else, and we would do limited runs of maybe 50 shirts and go sell them all that weekend. And then when we returned to that same town, maybe 3 months later, we had new merch at cost, because we were the ones literally creating it and selling it, you know, hand to hand. So we learned how to be performers, entertainers, communicators. I learned how to be a manager of people and projects, right? So I took on these roles, and the through line of all this is that I did it myself. We did it ourselves. We weren't waiting for a booking agent to say, hey, I picked you. I want you to play this festival or to play this venue or open for this national touring band. Did it ourselves. We didn't wait for a record label to say, hey, I want to give you an advance to record this music and we're going to get you distribution. You know, I figured out, how do we get our shit into Hot Topic? How do we get it into the local record stores? How do we get it online for digital sales? We did it ourselves.
You essentially, you became the gatekeeper.
Yes.
In the olden days, the gatekeeper had to let you into the club. And as the DIY movement grew, and as technology grew, like you're just talking about how you booked a tour through MySpace using the Radius tool, finding other bands that were like you. It just made it so much more of a powerful amplifier of what we could do before. And something that you said that I was actually thinking in my head, I was just getting so excited about this thought, is, as you were mentioning Rusty and making merch, you guys had great merch and you always kept it coming. But DIY could really be DIO, because we do it ourselves, meaning a lot of what we started, we had an idea, but then we maybe didn't know how to go through and implement it or turn it into that physical product. And that just gave so much space for collaboration, which then also teaches not only how to manage a project, but how to collaborate, how to have mutually beneficial relationships. And I just think that the DIY is really DIO when we look at it, because we made some great partnerships. Like, even as we were coming up, we realized that partnering with each other, like touring with another band who was DIY, then amplified your power or your brand. And it just makes you realize that as you and I come together often and are in some of the same circles, we're often elevated by the really great humans who are around us. So while we are all DIYing it, we're also DIOing it, which stands for DO, which DO is metal. So.
Yeah, no, I think that's well said. We're stronger together. I think the lesson in this type of mindset is that we're taking responsibility for what we want for ourselves and in the world. We're not waiting for the quote gatekeeper to say, I choose you, or you're ready, you're good enough, here's the tools, let me do it. The more that we wait for the gatekeeper, per se, the more power we give up, the more leverage we give up.
Yeah.
I think it's so important to do things yourself, because not only does it sharpen and broaden a skill set, but it gives you, like, it gets your hands dirty, and you get that experience, and that experience can be leveraged for all kinds of things in the future. One of the sadder things for me, when we're talking back in like 2005, 2006, when Geoff and I, we started playing in bands and sharing stages together. That was a very fertile, prosperous time for local music, especially in our community. And I know so many relatively successful band members that once that ended, because the band ended for whatever reason, they never really took ownership of how much potential that they not only earned, but just the vastness of a skill set that they could apply in other areas. The skills that we learned really have nothing to do with music aside from like our instrumentation.
Right.
But these are entrepreneurial skills that translate to anything. So, you and I were able to take a lot of those and build new things in the world and try, whether it was new goals or endeavors or otherwise, because it all translated. And I think also we had just our own, I think, self-confidence, because we had already done it and made a lot of mistakes, but also tasted some success in it, which allowed us to believe more in ourselves and our ability to do things ourselves. So Geoff, I'm interested in you sharing publicly, some of the ways in projects and goals for yourself that you kind of took everything you learned as a band member and then applied it in other ways.
Yeah. So being a band member, being a creative, like I saw this on the table as you were talking. This is a Swiss Army knife, and it really makes you turn into a Swiss Army knife. You're going to be a little bit more of a jack of all trades. Also, your confidence, your belief in yourself, that you can do something, even though you have no idea how to do it right now, you're going to figure it out, and you've done this before, just helps to break down that barrier to entry to a lot of projects or big plans that a lot of us want to start. And for me, professionally, I think the one that stands out as being most fulfilling, as well as the most daunting, because I had no idea what I was doing, was creating co-founding a nonprofit called Mission Fit. And the only reason I was qualified to do it is because I was going to be the human that was the first one there in the morning and then the last one there at night. And I was going to put in the work, and what I didn't know how to do, I was going to figure out how to do myself, or find the right people to partner with. The collaborations and partnerships with grant writers and with other very experienced nonprofits was so valuable. Mission Fit wouldn't exist without that. And I just kind of knew I don't even know that I knew the path. The path was inside me because I'd done it before. And, the idea that if you have a goal, try and find somebody else who has completed that goal, and just ask them if you can provide some value in their life, or if you can just buy them lunch or coffee or whatever it may be, and pick their brain, and they'll help you advance forward. So these things came so naturally, and I only realized in hindsight why some of the steps came so smoothly, and why other steps that were still challenging didn't put me off. I wasn't upset that I didn't know how to do it. I just, okay, gonna have to figure out how to do this. And because of that, the Mission Fit still stands. It is now run successfully in Baltimore. I replaced myself, and it had such a good foundation built on a culture, which is another thing we've talked about in all of music, is you're creating a culture, you're creating an experience. And I think that also just came so naturally to me because of what we've already successfully done as musicians. How about you? How have these concepts tied into your life and into your career?
Yeah. I mean, first I want to say, look, I've had the privilege of being your friend, especially as created and cultivated Mission Fit. And, I saw you get your hands dirty in every aspect of that endeavor. And I think it's helpful to have a sense of all the different things that goes into a project like that. And then along the way, having the self-awareness of, maybe this isn't my particular skill set, whether it's fundraising or the technology side, or maybe I just don't like this aspect of the work. And but even if you're going to then hire someone to do it or find a partner to collaborate with, knowing what goes into those skills and the purposes of those functions, I think gives you a clearer sense of decision making of this is the person I want to hire, and maybe it's worth spending more money or more time with that person because you really understand the value of what you're getting there. For me, look, I started a company called Beatwell, and through that I provide rhythm-based experiences for outcomes such as team building and wellness. And that started at the beginning of grad school for me. I have a master's in clinical psychology, and I realized from the very start of it that if I don't live as a drummer or a musician, I'm not going to be happy. I'm not going to feel most alive, and I'm not going to be able to provide as much value to the world as I could. So I used all of grad school far differently than most did, and no wonder, prior professors still ask me to come speak to their current students to share my narrative of how I used my grad school experience. I didn't care about getting A's. I cared about building a career, testing theories, trying new things, integrating drumming and rhythm with the fields of psychology and counseling. And because I had vision and because I had purpose and passion, I ended up getting those A's because I was fully applied. I was all in all the courses. So, but taking those band skills, I realized I am now offering a service that, at least in a 21st century Western culture, is pretty unique, is pretty rare. So I had to leverage media. I had to use my skills as a communicator, whether writing or making videos, doing interviews, to let the world know that I am here and I have this service that I find to be very valuable. So in building Beatwell, making that a career, I also realized I had this itch for pro wrestling. It's something that I've always been interested in. It's something that I was trained to do and performed as such as a teenager. And, fate, or whatever you want to call it, in Baltimore, one of the premier pro wrestling companies in the world is located here. I was finding ways to get into that company, but I ended up being on a plane with the guy in charge, the COO, and I saw it as the opportunity of a lifetime. And all of the work that I had done up until that point in pro wrestling as a fan, but also as someone who has developed a skill set in communication, in branding, in marketing, in engaging the public through art and performance, but also through selling. All that put me in the position to go up to him, shake his hand, and ask to sit next to him. And I cultivated a relationship with him over like a year and a half, to the point where I felt that I demonstrated enough value, I provided enough value to have a really big ask, which was like, hey man, I want to contribute at a high level, which led to a full-time job with a premier pro wrestling company.
Yeah.
And I had no idea what the fuck I was doing. I mean, like, I did, but I didn't really,
Right.
and all of that was true, but I was willing to do it myself. And like, I didn't get into that company at the position I was in the traditional route, whether through a corporate kind of trajectory or a more pro wrestling trajectory. I was this like musician / psychotherapist that was now, leading the communication efforts of an international pro wrestling entertainment company. But I had this belief in myself of like, I'm going to do it, because all the other things in the past seemed improbable or impossible. And yet I jumped, and I didn't drown. I made plenty of mistakes. I had plenty of successes. It was thrilling beyond imagined, and in that job position, I was able to, again, broaden my skills. I got to create commercials. I got to create events for thousands of people. I got to help create some of the creative that played out through a pro wrestling storyline. And now I can take all of that experience and, again, use that to inspire and to inform the next thing that I want to do myself.
Yeah. And if I could highlight one thing you said, is your timeline, the cultivation of a relationship that brought you to a place where you could make a big ask by providing value and insight was a year and a half. And sometimes DIY is not the fast track. Sometimes it does allow you to remove hurdles or obstacles that are in your way by doing it yourself, but it is not always the fast track. And I would say that a lot of the best built relationships are built over time and trust and true value versus a quick buck or a quick paid partnership or anything like that. And it just goes to show that you did sidestep all the other corporate paths, but you did it in an alternative way that still took time and work and thought. And I can think back, I can remember back to us just taking walks in Remington and just talking about what you were thinking about doing and how you could provide value to this company. And you were spot on, you were right, and you played your cards right, and you then got that dream job to do that. You essentially created that dream job, another creation. You dreamt it, you thought it, figured out how you could best provide value to the world, and then made it a reality. But again, highlighting that was a year and a half courting to create this massive opportunity, which you then succeeded on to the level of a Madison Square Garden event. So it's just looking at the timeline is always valuable, I think, to any of our stories.
Yeah, look, I think with most things, it's important to kind of see the flip side, to pull at both ends. So look, life is short. Life is very short. And from all the people that are much older than me, they often say that the older you get, the quicker it goes. So understanding that our time here to create, to live is really short, that helps fuel urgency for me. At the same time, looking at the next 50 years of my life, like that's really long. So we have, and that's why playing that narrative out for a year and a half made sense to me, because I had time on my side as being someone, in his early 30s at that time. So I think there's a lot of truth to kind of pulling at both ends when we're playing with this concept of time, especially when it's going after things that we really desire, that we really want. And I hope that if anyone takes anything away from this, it's this idea that you can do it yourself. We now have the gift of like Wi-Fi, like high-speed internet, and decades now of innovation in platforms and software and applications that allow us to create and connect with people all over the world. When I started trying to put together like rhythm facilitation for the purpose of wellness, there were only a handful of people around the world doing that and making a full-time living doing it. But the internet allowed me to connect with those people and then travel the country to go train with them and seek them out as mentors.
Yeah.
So you are watching us through the internet right now. So whatever it is that makes you feel alive and perhaps can be a pursuit or a goal of yours, simply start with a Google search and figure out who's doing it and connect, find ways to be valuable to them, and then go in with like an open mind and open ears and open eyes. That's what's always worked for me.
Yeah. I think if any of our friends listening or watching needed permission, Jordan and I are giving you permission. Just take the leap. Do the thing. We'll be your gatekeepers. You're good. Move forward with that thing that you were thinking about doing. It doesn't matter as much if you know what you're doing as much as it matters that you know why you're doing it. And that's going to be what gives you the miles. That's going to be what lets you take another step, another step, another step with absolute confidence, even though you don't know what the step afterward is going to be. So I hope this provided some good value to you. This is what we're always trying to put out into the world, things that just help unlock other people's creative processes and entrepreneurial spirit and everything like that. And I think, Jordan, if you want to close us out with any last thoughts, I feel really excited about what we've talked about today.
Cool, man. Look, this is perfect because the past couple seconds, your video is starting to glitch on my end. We will see if it glitched on the final product, but even still, it's a perfect lesson. And I use the word perfect, but I'll frame it in this way. If you're going to wait until the timing is perfect, if you're going to wait until the service or the product is perfect, then you'll likely be waiting forever. Good enough is good enough. And I think we can all make the judgment call on when it's time to execute. But if we come from a place of fear, I think that's often, at least for me, telling me, wait, because it's not ready. It's not good enough. So perfection is not the goal. I think execution is the goal. And as long as we learn from the ways in which we execute, then to keep doing that, that's perfect. All right,
Amen.
but yeah, fear, and I still experience this. Geoff, I'm sure you still experience this. We are filled with terror because we often dream about doing big things that mean a lot to us. The fear and the terror is just the flip side of the joy and the passion that we feel for these things. And it's all to be honored and seen and respected, but ultimately the fear can't win because the fear is not serving us at a certain point. So we'll leave it with that. And now I am excited to hop off this call and do some other shit that I'm scared to do.
Amen.
Imperfectly.
It's such a good feeling. Anytime I talk to anybody in the business world and they mention that they're nervous about something, or I mention that I am, some true growth is around the corner. So brother, go grow. Have an awesome day. I'm going to go do the same.
You too, man. Take
Peace.
care.